All right guys, today we are talking about a serious problem, right to repair, poison pill, a lot of hot topics in this. What can grenade your supercar? So we hear the term poison pill right now in the news because of, Elon Musk buying Twitter. And what is it? It's basically a company putting something in a business that will make it less appealing to someone who's going to buy it. How is this happening with supercars? First off, let's go into the economics of supercars. Back in the 90s, supercars were extremely rare. They were very limited production, and the industry thought that there isn't a big market for high-end sports and luxury vehicles. Audi saw through this and thought, no, I think that the market with the dot-com boom, that there are a lot of potential buyers out there. And so they bought into Lamborghini. And then shortly after they bought Lamborghini, they developed the Gallardo, which was the first real mass-produced supercar. More Gallardos were produced than every Lamborghini in total combined before the Gallardo. And other manufacturers started taking notice. Ferrari started making more models and more of those models. Same with Mercedes and Maybach and the AMG GT. I mean, they're everywhere. Bentley with the Continental GT. I can't stand seeing Bentleys anymore because they're just so all over the place. So this became a big trend that took over the early 2000s up to the 2010s. But a new problem arose as a result of that. What we saw is a lot of old supercars filling the streets. That took away what made supercars attractive. Exclusivity. If you see a ton of a car around, then it kind of hurts the brand. It allows people who maybe would have saved up to buy a newer model, settling for an older model and just paying to upkeep them. I mean, Ferrari cares about its brand. They put a cease and desist to, what was it, Monster Cat or Deadmau5, whoever, for him turning his Ferrari into kind of a piece of art. Do you think that they would want an old 458 that's, sagging suspension, leaky oil with giant rims that kind of looks, no, it hurts the brand. An old used Ferrari hurts the brand, but unfortunately there are a ton of them out there. What did automakers start doing? Well, we saw already BMW and Rolls-Royce. We talked about that in another video about the transmission service. They just decided, hey, we're gonna tell people fluid's lifetime, which is about 8 years, and at that point, transmission will fail. They'll have to pay an exorbitant amount to replace or rebuild that transmission, and maybe someone can't afford it and they'll sell off the car for parts or junk it, and that can eliminate some of our old cars. Ferrari had seen what BMW is doing with the transmissions, and they took it another step and they worked out something with Getrag. And Getrag is a famous transmission builder. Anyone who has a 90s BMW knows Getrag. But they also know that Getrag wants to put components in the transmission that you cannot buy. Now, you hear Louis Rossman talk a lot about right to repair and Apple products and why it's important. And the reason it's important is because if you buy a product and then you cannot repair it, then it gives the dealership a monopoly on what's done with your car, and if you can own it, and the cost of ownership and the cost of repairing. Now, shops like me go in and find these problems, and we develop workarounds, and then we help lower that price and make it more affordable. What is it that's in Ferraris and also these Mercedes that are poison pills? In the Getrag power shift transmission, there are bearings that are sealed bearings. Anyone who knows the Porsche 996 knows the IMS bearing and how much of a problem it grenades the engine. And the reason is seals fail at about 10 years. And when they fail, the grease that's contained within those seals to cool the bearings gets washed out by transmission fluid. Grease has special properties that allow it to cool the bearing without being taken to a cooler and then cooled to remove the heat and put back in the bearing, but transmission fluid is not able to. Transmission fluid has to be pumped through a cooler to take the temperature out and then sprayed back onto the bearing at a lower temperature to remove the heat. So when the transmission fluid washes out the grease, you no longer have the cooling and lubrication that the bearing needs, and then it starts to wear and grenade itself. I have an example of this. I did an oil analysis on this Ferrari California, which has the 7-speed DCT from Getrag, and then you can see high amount of bearing wear and also a change in viscosity. That's from dilution of the proper transmission fluid due to leaking seals. So we see both the things that I'm telling you is happening in this transmission. Now, Ferrari has this transmission in every Ferrari now. The 458, the 488, the FF, GTC Lusso, F12, it's everywhere. So this is the transmission on all the Ferraris that we're starting to see develop some age. Now Micah, so what? Take the transmission apart and replace these bearings. That's where we come into a problem. These bearings have a lot of specifications that make them rare, and Getrag contracts NSK for OEM bearings. Talked about OEM before, but in this case, OEM means not available for you to purchase. As a matter of fact, if you reach out to NSK and ask for bearings like these, and you have a manufacturing facility that makes, let's say, electric motors, they'll sell them to you. But if they find out you are registered as an automotive company, they will terminate your order. I found out the hard way. I tried to pose as a manufacturing plant, gave them my shipping address, and then they were like, no, you're automotive, we Googled you, so no, you can't have the bearings. So I found a workaround, and so we'll make another video about that. If you have a Ferrari or a SLS AMG or AMG GT that you want to rebuild the transmission, I can help you with that. What makes these bearings so special? Michael, why can't I just buy them from another brand? First of all, the transmission inner bore is not a standard size. Bearings come in standard sizes, and one of the bearings in this transmission has a larger inner diameter by a couple of millimeters. And you can't buy a bearing and bore it out. Once the inner race is hardened, you can't bore it out without changing the properties of that inner race. So this is a bearing that you just simply cannot buy. The other bearings that are in there that are sealed are standard sizes, but they operate at an extremely high speed. They are spinning on a shaft that's directly connected to the engine, so they need to be able to handle speeds of up to 8,500 RPM. A sealed bearing is limited to 5,600 RPM. But these bearings have a special light contact high-speed seal, which again, you can't buy. Now I found some somewhere else, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Another specification that these bearings have is that they are hydrogenated NBR, which means they are highly chemical resistant. And DCT fluid is a hydraulic chemical fluid that's very caustic, so you have to have a seal that can handle that. So there are three things on these bearings that make them basically irreplaceable. And the dealership's hoping that, you know, if you're going to buy a $50,000 or $80,000 Ferrari California, and then you have to take the transmission out, send it to Ferrari, and they charge $25,000 to rebuild it, that you'll be less likely to buy that car, and more of them will start being destroyed. And we see this. If you go on eBay, you can see that a Getrag 7-speed DCT goes for like $6,000 to $9,000 as non-working units, as parts-only units. So ones that have already grenaded just to get the parts so you can rebuild your own. That's ridiculous. And guess what? The bearings that have these seals in these transmissions are no good. And once you remove them from the shaft, it's so violent a procedure to get them off that they are no good even if they were good. It destroys them. It's just not affordable environmentally. How much pollution do you think it takes to take this 400-pound transmission and ship it to Germany to be rebuilt and then ship another one to you? I mean, it's extremely wasteful in pollution, on the shipping, on the amount of labor, the time, when it could just be done here. I mean, I have it completely apart. I am ready to go. I just can't get the part. This sucks. It's irresponsible, and this is just one of the flaws of capitalism, that if you put money over everything, then dealers are gonna start doing some shady stuff to get money.
If you have this Ferrari and you want your transmission rebuilt, bring it by Hollywood Mechanic. We do have a way to replace all the custom seals, the custom bearings, and get them to last for another 10 years, especially if you're like getting the speed sensor fault. We have a special high temp grease and special ways to reseal those.